Hey, hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Phoebe, and I'm the Assistant Education Manager here at ChildNet, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be opening this webinar to support you as teachers and educators. I'm joined by my colleague Alison, who is also part of the education team, and you'll be hearing more from her a little later on. So this is our final webinar in a series that we've been hosting throughout this academic year, and it's perhaps one of the most important topics we've talked about to date: online sexual extortion. So this is an emerging harm that has particularly come to the forefront of online safety discussions over the past few months, leading to the National Crime Agency publishing an unprecedented warning to schools and colleges about this issue in April. So before we kind of get into that, let's start with a quick reminder of who ChildNet are. So we are an online safety charity whose mission is to make the internet a great and safe place for all children and young people. And we do this in a number of ways. So the education team, including Alison and I, travel to schools across the country, working directly with children aged 3 to 18 years old, parents, carers, and professionals like yourselves, all about online safety. We also develop a range of free educational resources that are available on our website to support you in delivering online safety messages in your setting. ChildNet also works with the government and the internet industry to encourage and advise them in how they can work to help keep young people safe online as well. So at ChildNet, we are also part of the UK Safer Internet Centre, and this is a partnership between 3 leading online safety organisations: ourselves, SWGFL, and the Internet Watch Foundation. And through the partnership, we offer a whole host of resources, services, and events, just like this webinar. We also coordinate Safer Internet Day here in the UK, and whilst SWGFL host a number of really fantastic helplines, which you'll hear a little bit more about later on, the Internet Watch Foundation operate a vital hotline service as part of their work to specifically remove child sexual abuse imagery from the internet. And that kind of allows members of the public to report that content if they were to see it. Now, the UK Safer Internet Centre partnership have been working together on this issue of sextortion for some time now, with the IWF publishing some of the earliest advice specific to this topic. We're really proud to be able to deliver this focus session for you today. So before we get started, I wanted to let you know that the Q&A feature is open and will be online for a little bit, around 15 minutes after the end of the webinar today, to answer any questions that you might have. So do feel free to kind of put them in that Q&A feature as we're talking, and we'll try and come to them throughout, and especially at the end. And we're expecting the webinar today to be around 30 minutes. But for now, I'm going to hand over to Alison, who's going to start us off with an explanation of what exactly we mean by sextortion.
Okay, thank you, Phoebe. So, in its simplest terms, sextortion is a type of blackmail where someone threatens to share nudes, sexual information, or videos of their victim unless that victim pays money or agrees to do something else, such as share more images. To capture what that means in reality, let's look at this example on the screen. This is adapted from real cases of sextortion that we know young people have experienced. In this case, the young person has been messaged online by an unknown contact who claims to have a nude picture of them. The blackmailer is threatening to send that image onto the victim's friends and family if they don't transfer them £100. At this point, I will mention briefly that the language used here and throughout this webinar. We'll be using the term sextortion, which you may have also heard in the media to describe this issue. As with many online harms, there is some debate about the most appropriate language to use to describe particular behaviours, and sextortion is a shorter term than the more technical phrasing of online sexual extortion. Now, there are patterns in the reports of this behaviour. Broadly, sextortion can be split into 2 main types. Financially motivated sextortion, where the victim is asked for money. This could be via bank transfer, an electronic gift card for the required value, or even in something like cryptocurrency. The other form of sextortion sees the blackmailer demanding further images or explicit content. Either form of sextortion is a crime and can be reported to the police. This is something we'll address a little later on. But another thing to note is that sextortion can be committed by both individuals, but most typically by groups of people working together, particularly organised crime groups. On that note, we know that sextortion is potentially a behaviour that could occur between young people, so peer-to-peer. And indeed, isolated examples of what could be classed as sextortion were identified in research with young people delivered by ChildNet as far back as 2017. Project D-Shame, which was a joint project between the UK, Hungary and Denmark, found that 7% of teen respondents said that someone had used sexual images of them to threaten or blackmail them. This project was focused on peer-to-peer online sexual harassment, and there has subsequently been a real focus in this space. If you did become aware of an incident like this, perhaps between two young people in your care, this would be considered an example of child-on-child sexual abuse. Naturally, your response would vary case by case, but would still need escalating using your safeguarding procedures and may still result in involvement of law enforcement. Of course, you would need to keep in mind that the perpetrator is also a child and is displaying harmful sexual behaviour, so will also need support. All of that being said, for this session, our focus will primarily be on situations where the perpetrator is an adult or an anonymous online contact, following the trends of increasing reports involving organised crime groups. Phoebe is now going to talk you through some of those trends.
Thank you, Alison. Yes, so unfortunately, the most clear trend in reports of sextortion has been the steady increase in the number of cases. We can see that in this graph shared by sharing data from the IWF. As we mentioned earlier, the IWF are one of our partners in the UK Safer Internet Centre, and their remit is removing child sexual abuse content from the internet. And as part of that task, they also work hard to monitor patterns in the content that they're coming across, and also accept reports from the public via their hotline. And they run a service called Report Remove in collaboration with Childline, and we'll look at that a little bit later. But this has allowed them to identify the increase shown here. Furthermore, these numbers are reflected in what we are hearing from other organisations. The National Crime Agency, for example, who we mentioned, released an alert to schools just a few weeks ago. They reported a 266% increase in the number of reports of sextortion made to them, climbing from 243 in 2020 and 890 just 2 years later. And this pattern is not limited to the UK. This graph shows data kindly shared by the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children, who are working over in the United States. And we can immediately see that familiar increase and how these numbers have gone up, particularly in the past few years. So all of this has led to a collective response from across government, charities and the internet industry, which is definitely encouraging to see, but does also reinforce the seriousness of this situation. Most notably, we have the National Crime Agency and the Department of Education publishing that joint alert for schools, which is definitely a good starting point for anyone on this webinar today. It contains key advice and resources, including an information letter that can be sent home to parents and carers to raise awareness. And we'll share the link to that alert for you all now, and you can save that and have a look at that later. Other notable responses included an update to guidance for schools on the issues of sharing nudes and semi-nudes. And this document is produced by the UK Council for Internet Safety, a collaboration forum through which government, the tech community and the third sector all work together. Updates to this document included new scenarios which specifically reference sextortion cases, to help support schools in understanding how best to respond to these kinds of incidents. The advice can be found on the UK Council for Internet Safety website and in Welsh as well via the Keeping Safe Online section on Hub. Elsewhere, we know industry have been thinking about their responses to sextortion and included efforts to deal effectively with reports of sextortion and campaigns from companies like Snap to raise awareness with key audiences on their platforms. And of course, we've seen global responses from a whole host of organisations sharing advice and producing relevant resources. The UK Safer Internet Centre have compiled a helpful list of these, which we'll share a link to now as well, so you have access to that as well. I'm going to hand back over to Alison, and she's going to dig a little deeper into how sextortion can happen.
Great, thank you, Phoebe. Yes, it is really important that whilst we understand the most likely ways young people will experience sextortion, we also acknowledge that it can happen in other ways as well, and that any victim is going to need the same support and understanding from the adults around them. We have identified 4 possible ways that the images used in sextortion might be obtained before being used to blackmail a victim. The first and most common way is where the victim shares the images of themselves, not knowing that it will then be used against them. It's vitally important that we recognise even where a victim has produced and shared that image of themselves, they are in no way responsible for their experience of sextortion. The criminal who has coerced, tricked, and is now blackmailing them is always the person at fault. In fact, we know these criminals can be incredibly skilled at manipulating their victims into participating in their schemes, and that often sextortion will start with catfishing. The criminal will pretend to be someone else, typically someone who they think their victim will find attractive, and they will start up a flirty conversation with them, eventually luring the victim into sharing a nude image of themselves. This could happen quite quickly. Some cases have described moving from initial contact to first images being shared in just 10 minutes. The criminal may share their own photos, although of course they are not actually photos of the perpetrator, but photos of who they are pretending to be, in an attempt to convince the victim to reciprocate. As soon as the victim does send their own image, the conversation switches. The blackmailer will make their demands and the victim's world is turned on its head. Examples of language we know have been used in sextortion attempts include, "I will make you go viral," and "I have everything I need to destroy your life." Many sextortion cases specifically involve the criminal making use of information like someone's contact or friend list on social media, specifying that those are the people they will share on the images with if a victim doesn't comply. Other, less common ways the image could be gained is a victim's device or accounts being hacked, or the images being digitally manipulated. This could mean non-explicit photos being edited, perhaps using generative AI so that they appear to be nude. This is sometimes described as nudification. Of course, whether the images are genuine or just appear realistic, the impact on the victim is the same. Indeed, in some cases, the blackmailer may not have any images at all, but the threat or the fear that they might have is enough to scare a teenager into action. We know that fear is the key emotion these blackmailers are looking to prey on. It is their hope that victims will feel sufficiently isolated and alone that they will see no other choice than to comply with demands. We also know victims can feel powerless to do anything, and emotions like shame play a huge factor. Of course, so much of this is tied up in the way that we teach and speak about issues like nude images. If education focuses specifically on the law against nude images of under 18s, for example, then a child being targeted by sextortion may not seek out help for fear that they will end up in trouble for taking the image in the first place. This is why it's so important that we consider our language when we talk about this issue and other online experiences, and that we are proactively avoiding using victim blaming language, which might stop someone from getting the help that they need. One final point I wanted to share before we move on to looking at the advice on how to respond to sextortion is whilst anyone of any age and any gender can be a victim of sextortion, including adults and educators themselves, there are trends in how victims are targeted. For example, we know that boys are most likely to be targeted by financial sextortion and coerced for money, where girls are more likely to experience sextortion, which blackmails them for new or further images or sexually explicit content, and that they are more likely than boys to be targeted by individuals, for example, coerced or abused through online grooming. I'll hand over to Phoebe now, who's going to take you through the key advice for responding to sextortion.
Thank you, Alison. So naturally, the first thing to say is, of course, that sextortion, like any other online harm, is first and foremost a safeguarding issue. That means that if you are concerned that a young person you work with has been a victim of this crime, you need to escalate it using your school or organisation's safeguarding procedures and policies. Similarly, you need to make sure that you're following general safeguarding practice in your response. So not asking leading questions, not promising a child that you will keep what they've told a secret, and ensuring records of any conversation you've had about this matter are as accurate as possible. That key safeguarding reminder aside, let's look at the specific advice for anyone who has been a victim of this crime. This is relevant for you in your personal and professional life, should you ever be targeted by sextortion, as well as to help with your response if you are needed to offer support to a young victim. Firstly, anyone who is targeted by sextortion is advised not to blame themselves and to remember that the criminals are the ones at fault here. You are not alone and there is support available. It's never too late to reach out and get help. Even if an image has been shared online, there's still things that can be done to minimise the impact and the spread of that image. The advice to anyone who receives a threat or blackmail of this kind is to not respond to the blackmailer. That means not replying to the messages or contact attempt in any way, and certainly not complying with their demands by sending money or sending further images. Instead, you should save the evidence of what you have experienced. So this means not deleting any messages and wherever possible taking a screenshot or a photo of messages that you've been sent, and also of the relevant profiles or account details of anyone who has been involved in that sextortion attempt. These details will help in the next part, which is reporting. It's really important to report what is happening, and this can be done in a number of ways. You can report via the service or platform where the messages have been sent. For example, if the contact has been made via Instagram or Snapchat, it can be reported using the reporting tools on Instagram and Snapchat. Almost all cases of sextortion are very likely to break the community guidelines or rules of whatever platform is being used, so they can support and take action against those perpetrators. Additionally, you can also make a report to the police. This can be done by telephoning 101, or where the victim of sextortion is a child under the age of 18, it can be reported via CEOP, who are the CEOP, or the Child Exploitation Online Protection Command. They are part of the National Crime Agency, whose remit is online sexual abuse. So they have an online reporting tool, which again we'll share with you now so you have access to that link. So for young people who have been targeted by sextortion, our advice around reporting also includes telling a trusted adult, and that might be a family member at home, but it might be you as an educator and as a professional as well. We also signpost children to helplines who can offer support if they feel that they don't have anyone to speak to in person. And most often that's Childline on 0800 1111. But we also signpost to the Mix, who offer support for under 25-year-olds, and MEC, who offer similar services for children in Wales, including a Welsh language service. There's several specialists services which can support with cases of sextortion, including the removal of nude images which have been shared online. So Stop NCII, the Revenge Porn Helpline, are both services run by the helpline teams at SWGFL who work with victims of intimate image abuse, including sextortion. And again, we'll share that link for you now. To be clear, these two services are intended for adults over the age of 18 only, and you can only use the tool on your own behalf, not for somebody else. So let's focus now on the tools available for children and young people. So the first of these is Report Remove, and this is a tool created in partnership between the IWF and Childline. It can only be used by those based in the UK, and it only works for images showing children under the age of 18. The tool has been designed to be used by a young person themselves, although of course they will benefit from any support you can offer through the process. The young person will need to create a Childline account and are asked to prove their age, generally using some form of ID, although this is not compulsory. Once they have done so, they can report any nude image of them that has been shared publicly online, for example, by providing a URL of where that's been posted. The IWF will then work to remove the image and will give the image what's known as a hash. The hash is like a unique digital footprint identifying that image, which is then shared through a hash list. The IWF work with hundreds of companies across the world who can then use these hashes to identify these images and remove them more quickly, or even prevent them from being re-uploaded online at all. Children who use the Report Remove tool are also put in touch with a Childline counsellor who can offer additional support and can access updates on their report via the Childline account. I'm sure you can imagine, for a child who is feeling scared and alone, knowing their image has been shared online, this service can be invaluable in giving them a sense of control and moving forward from the experience. Report Remove is also not just for sextortion, cases of sextortion, and can be used in any circumstance where a nude, partially nude, or a sexually explicit image of someone under the age of 18 has been shared online. For example, if they've accidentally posted that content on their own account, or if a former partner has shared it on. Alongside Report Remove, there's another specialist service which can be used, that is Take It Down. Take It Down is run by the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children in the USA. Take It Down uses similar hash technology to Report Remove and can be used by anyone, anywhere, to report nude images taken of themselves before they were 18 years old. As with Report Remove, Take It Down's technology is limited to public platforms. They cannot remove images from individual devices like smartphones or laptops where they've been downloaded, and they don't work on encrypted services like WhatsApp. However, Take It Down does work with some huge public platforms, including Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, OnlyFans, and pornography services as well, like Pornhub. Take It Down requires the person reporting the image to have the image on their device, although they are clear that this is intended to be the device where the image was originally created, and people should not download nude images of this kind to their device for the purpose of them then being able to report them. When they report it, Take It Down will create a hash for the image without making a copy of the original image or removing it from the device of where it was created. In fact, nobody sees the image at all. Then, if one of the platforms we mentioned detects an image or video on its public or encrypted services that matches this hash, it can then take action to limit the spread of that content. Both Report Remove and Take It Down are great resources to share with your safeguarding colleagues who may not be aware of them, as well as any young people that you work with, particularly those who have been victim of sextortion. Both Report Remove and Take It Down can be used on images that you might fear being shared, but also that you don't know for sure what's happened to them yet. I'm going to hand back over to Alison now, who will summarise some of the other things that you can do as professionals to take action in response to sextortion and in response to this webinar.
Thanks, Phoebe. Up until now, we've focused on what sextortion is and how it might be experienced by the young people you work with. We've also mentioned how different organisations are responding to this issue. Whatever your role, whether you're joining us today as an educator or another professional working directly with children and young people, there are certainly things you can be doing as well. We've summarised these under 3 headings, as you can see on the slide. So let's start with short-term suggestions. The simplest and most important thing you can do is familiarise yourself with key advice, which you've already started by attending this webinar today. I would recommend taking a look at the NCA Alert after today's session, and we'll share the link again to that now. There is also written advice available on the ChildNet and UK Safer Internet Centre's websites and signposting to further resources on this topic. The next thing to do is to begin the work of raising awareness in your school or organisation. This might be with colleagues, including safeguarding colleagues. You could share key resources via email, and we'll also be uploading a recording of this webinar to YouTube, so you can pass that on if you found it useful. If you have a team meeting or staff training coming up, adding in 5 minutes to give an overview of this topic may be handy as well. Of course, you also need to consider the other parts of your school community, parents and carers and pupils themselves. The NCA Alert does include a template letter to share with parents and carers, and for pupils, there are lots of advice pages written specifically for young people. You may wish to signpost to one of these, or the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children in the States have produced a short video that explains the issue in a child-friendly way. It's worth noting that the tip line referenced in the video isn't available in the UK, but this does give a good opportunity to signpost to alternative reporting routes here, including the relevant staff members in school that children can go to if they have concerns. We'll share the link to the video now, as well as a great video explaining the report remove tool run by Childline. We also spoke to our youth representatives on their views about raising awareness of this issue. Across the board, they agreed that parents, carers and schools need to be talking about this more, that raising awareness with young people is key. I really like this final quote at the bottom here, talking about posters in bathrooms and toilets, just as you probably have seen about whistleblowing procedures. So why not create and share posters on this issue, or posters that signpost reporting routes, such as the one on this page for report remove? Longer term, we need to begin thinking about how sextortion fits into the broader landscape of online harms that young people may experience, and how we work to prevent and respond to these as professionals. This is going to mean working with relevant colleagues to ensure messaging is built into your curriculum. This might fall under subjects like relationships and sex education. For some year groups, you may decide to include direct references to the issue of sextortion, perhaps through scenarios or a dedicated lesson. But it's important to remember that there are lots of other ways you can get key messages across. For example, in discussions around consent, sharing nude images, or why anyone putting pressure on you to do something you're uncomfortable with online is never okay. Alongside this, we would recommend reviewing relevant school policies, particularly safeguarding policies and procedures, to ensure that they are up to date and that staff feel confident in how to respond to any concerns raised around this issue. Ultimately, we're looking to establish a safe and supportive environment where young people feel confident speaking up about their online experiences, good and bad, and where they know any concerns they have will be recognised and that support is available. This does mean thinking carefully about how to support victims appropriately, especially as we know that teaching about specific online harms is likely to see an increase in reports relating to that harm. We also spoke to our Youth Advisory Board and Digital Champions about the existing advice for young people wanting support with sextortion, and you can see that they had some concerns. They wanted young people to feel reassured that they wouldn't be blamed for what has happened, and to know that the issue would be effectively dealt with. They also had some concerns about going to the police, which we can see in the bottom point. Luckily, You as professionals are really well placed to support with this. As with any safeguarding concern, you can reassure young people that they're not alone, that you can support them and work together to help them move forward. We've already mentioned the importance of avoiding victim blaming language. Young people need to know that they are not to blame if they experience sextortion. We would also recommend working with the victim to determine next steps. Naturally, there'll be some things that you are required to do, for example, escalating their report. But we know that sextortion can make a victim feel powerless, and that young people are concerned about how the issue will be dealt with if they ask for help. So involving a young person in the next steps you might take, or at the very least ensuring they're informed of what those steps will be, is reassuring and even empowering for them. Finally, you can support with image removal if it has got out, letting the pupil know about the key tools we've discussed here today, and supporting with further conversations that might be needed with their parents, carers, or the police.
Thank you, Alison, and thank you everyone that has joined us today. We're coming to the end of our webinar now, and I just wanted to mention before we finish a few final resources. Remember, Alison and I will be answering any questions after this session as well, so do take that opportunity now to use the Q&A feature and put them on there if you wish. We have a short evaluation which will help inform our future work, and we're going to share that link in there now. It should literally only take you a minute, if that, to fill it out. So whilst we kind of give you a moment to do that, and whilst you kind of think about any final questions, I want to finish by signposting to two resources. So one of them is the UK Council for Internet Safety, and they were mentioned briefly earlier on and have produced guidance to help professionals avoiding victim blaming language, as well as detailed guidance on how to respond to incidents in school that involve the sharing of nude or semi-nudes. Both of these are helpful and relevant in the issue of sextortion and can be found by searching for UK Council of Internet Safety online. Or if you're in Wales, these resources are also available in Welsh, and they can be found in the Keeping Safe Online section in Hub under Welsh Government Guidance. Finally, I wanted to share the Professionals Online Safety Helpline, and this is run by our UK Safer Internet Centre colleagues at SWGFL, and is free to contact via email or via phone. The helpline will support any professionals who works with children and young people, whether that's in school or in any other capacity. They have experience of responding to incidents of sextortion and can support with advice and guidance on this issue and many, many other issues as well. Brilliant. Okay, so we have officially come to the end of our webinar today. So thank you again, all of you, for joining. We really do hope that you found it useful. And if you could fill out that evaluation, that would be fantastic. We'll pause there, and me and Alison will have a look at the Q&A and see if we've had any questions in. And if we have, we will do our very best to answer them. But thanks again for joining. Okay, at the moment, we don't have any questions through, but again, we will stay around for a few more minutes, so feel free to post something if you wish. Okay, I think we'll just give it another 30 seconds to see if we have any questions come through, and then we'll be closing up our webinar for today. Okay, we've not had any more questions in, so we will finish off our webinar for today. Thank you again, everybody, for taking the time to listen, and we do hope you found it useful. Bye for now.